Before you keep watching, type in the comments where you're watching this from, and what time it is for you right now, exactly as you're hearing my voice. Go ahead. I'll wait. Because somewhere out there, at this exact moment, on the other side of the world from wherever you are, there is a photograph. An ordinary-looking photograph, taken on a mountainside in Hawaii, more than 10 years ago. And if you stare at it long enough, really long enough, you start to notice something in the corner of the frame that shouldn't be there. A shape. Half hidden in the leaves. Low to the ground. Watching. The teenager who took that photograph vanished within hours of pressing the shutter button. He has never been found. Not his body. Not his backpack. Not so much as a single thread of his clothing. And the figure crouched in the bushes behind him has never been identified either. Not by his family. Not by the police. Not by the thousands of strangers on the internet who have spent the last decade staring at those pixels, trying to decide whether they're looking at a man, an animal, or simply a trick of the shadows. Today, we're going back to that mountain. We're going to walk through exactly what happened, hour by hour, in the final day anyone ever heard from him. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand why this photograph still keeps people up at night, more than a decade later. If a case like this is exactly the kind of thing you come here for, do me a favor right now, hit that like button, drop a comment letting me know you're locked in, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the Cold Case Archive. We put out cases like this every single week, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Alright. This is the disappearance of Daylenn Moke Pua, and the staircase they call the Stairway to Heaven. Most missing persons cases get reduced to a flyer. A name, an age, a height and weight, a phone number at the bottom for anyone with information. It's easy to glance at a poster like that for 2 seconds and move on without ever thinking about the person behind it. So before we go anywhere near that staircase, you should know who we're actually talking about. Daylenn Pua, almost everyone who knew him called him by his nickname, Moke, was 18 years old. He was from South Kona, a quiet district on the Big Island of Hawaii, and he was a senior at a Hawaiian immersion school, just a few short months from graduation. He already knew exactly what he wanted to do with his life. He wanted to go to culinary school. Specifically, he wanted to become a pastry chef. Friends and family would later describe how much he loved to bake, how he'd spend hours in the kitchen just to see someone smile at something he'd made. It's the kind of small, gentle detail that makes a disappearance like this even harder to sit with. An 18-year-old boy whose biggest ambition in the entire world was to make people happy with desserts. Moke wasn't the type to stay indoors, either. He loved to swim. He loved to hike. He was into photography, and it's actually because of that hobby that we have any of the pieces of this story we're about to walk through. His social media, in the weeks before he vanished, was filled with the kind of things you'd expect from any 18-year-old, beach days, friends, ordinary happiness. And it's worth being very clear about something, Moke was not a reckless kid who wandered onto a dangerous trail without knowing what he was doing. His own father would later describe him as an experienced hiker. This was not someone unfamiliar with the mountains. This was someone who understood exactly the kind of terrain he was about to put himself into. That particular weekend, Moke was staying on the island of Oahu with his grandmother, a woman named Martha Bear. And somewhere during that visit, an idea took hold of him, an idea about a very specific hike. Not just any hike. Arguably the most famous, most dangerous, and most illegal hike on the entire island. If you've never heard of the Haiku Stairs, let me paint the picture for you. Nearly 4,000 metal steps, 3,922, to be precise, bolted directly into the spine of the Ko'olau mountain range on Oahu. The staircase climbs more than 3,000 feet into the sky, following ridgelines so narrow and so steep that in certain sections, it stops feeling like a hike entirely and starts feeling more like scaling a ladder straight up into the clouds. On a clear day, if you make it to the top, you're rewarded with a panoramic view of Kaneohe Bay so striking that people genuinely question whether it's real. It's easy to see why they nicknamed it the Stairway to Heaven. But that name is a little deceiving, because this particular heaven comes with a very real, very dark side. These stairs were never built for hikers in the first place. They were constructed back in the 1940s, during the Second World War, by the United States Navy, built to give access to a top-secret radio station tucked deep inside the Haiku Valley. That station was reportedly powerful enough to send transmissions all the way across the Pacific Ocean, as far as Ship Station near Tokyo Bay. The original steps were wood. They were later replaced with metal. Either way, this was a military access route, not a tourist attraction. It was never meant for the public. As the decades passed, the base was decommissioned, the jungle crept back in, and the staircase itself began to rot. By 1987, conditions had deteriorated so badly that authorities shut the entire trail down completely. Railings loosened. Sections of stairway rusted through. Vegetation swallowed parts of the path. Simply put, it became genuinely dangerous. From that point forward, climbing the Haiku Stairs wasn't just risky, it was a crime. Trespassing charges. Possible arrest. And yet, there is something about telling people they absolutely cannot do something, especially something that ends in a view like that, that seems to make them want to do it even more. For years, hikers ignored every warning sign and climbed it anyway, and the mountain has made more than a few of them pay for that decision. Even seasoned, experienced hikers, people who knew precisely what they were doing, have slipped on those aging steps. Rescue teams have had to be dispatched for people stranded partway up the climb. And in 2015, the very year our story takes place, a major storm had torn through the region not long before, leaving entire sections of the staircase even more unstable than usual. That is the staircase Moke had set his sights on. Not a casual walk. A rusting, partially destroyed, nearly 4,000 step ascent up a cliff face, closed to the public, illegal to attempt, and already known for hurting people who underestimated it. His grandmother knew exactly what it was. She had seen it discussed on the local news before. When Moke brought up his plan, she told him plainly, "Don't do it." He went anyway. On the 25th of February, 2015, Moke posted a photo of the staircase to Facebook. The caption read something like, "Stairway to Heaven. Hiking this insane hike tomorrow. Wish me luck." He wasn't hiding his plan online, at least. Whatever caution he may have used with his grandmother, on social media he was open about exactly where he intended to go. Then, on the 26th of February, came what would turn out to be the very last post he would ever make. Just 4 words and a hashtag, and the hike begins, followed by the tag, Haiku. By the early morning hours of Friday, the 27th of February, he was ready to go. Here's where things get a little more complicated. When Moke spoke to his grandmother about his plans that morning, the location he named wasn't the Haiku Stairs directly, he told her he was heading to hike Mauna Lua Valley. Now, those two things aren't entirely disconnected. There is a known back route through Mauna Lua Valley that hikers use to access the staircase without passing through the guarded, residential front entrance. So it's very possible he simply told her the version of the plan that sounded a little less alarming. But the fact remains, what he told his family, and where he actually ended up, do not perfectly line up. That gap is something investigators themselves would later take note of. Whatever the precise route, here is what we do know for certain. Moke boarded a bus alone that morning and headed toward the mountains. Around 11 o'clock, he texted photographs to both his family and his girlfriend, photos of himself standing along the Ko'olau ridgeline, with the entire island stretching out behind him. It was proof that he'd made it out there. Proof that he was alive, climbing, and okay. Those texts are the last anyone has ever heard from him. After that moment, his phone goes completely silent, and he is never seen or heard from again. In the days immediately following Moke's disappearance, his family did everything within their power to help. They went back through every single message and photograph he had sent, searching for anything, any small detail, that might point rescuers in the right direction. In one of those final photos, they found something that stopped them cold. The image itself looks exactly like what you'd expect, Moke on the trail, the green walls of the valley rising around him. But off to the side, tucked into the foliage at the edge of the frame, there is a shape. Most of it is hidden behind leaves and branches. But above the brush line, visible enough that once you notice it, you cannot unsee it, is what looks unmistakably like the top of a man's head. It's a figure, crouched low in the undergrowth, on a trail that was supposedly closed and empty, in the exact location where Moke was last known to be alive. Could it be another hiker, out there just like Moke was, enjoying the same forbidden view? Absolutely, that's possible. But given the timing, given the circumstances, and given that this figure appears to be crouched down, almost as if hiding from the camera, the family couldn't shake the feeling that something about it was deeply wrong. For them, this no longer felt like a coincidence. It felt like evidence that someone had followed their son up onto an empty mountain. So they did exactly what you'd hope any family would do. They brought the image straight to the Honolulu Police Department, and then to the media and the public, asking anyone who recognized the figure, or who had been on that trail that day, to come forward. Police reviewed the photograph and issued a public alert. If that shape in the bushes was, in fact, a person, they said, that individual would be considered a person of interest in the case, someone investigators would very much like to speak with. The response to that appeal was almost total silence. No one ever came forward. No one ever said, "That was me, I was just resting in the bushes, here's what I remember from that day." To this day, more than 10 years later, the man in that photograph, if it is a man at all, has never been identified. Now, if you're still with me at this point in the story, do me a favor and drop a comment down below that just says, "I'm still here." I want to see exactly who's locked all the way into this one, because it's about to get even more unsettling. Investigators, for their part, were never quite as convinced by the photograph as Moke's family was. They couldn't even confirm with certainty that the shape was human, he was simply too far away from the camera. Some who have studied the image closely over the years have suggested it might be an animal, or nothing more than a trick of light and shadow, the kind of thing where your brain finds a face in a pattern that isn't really there. It certainly looks like a person to most people who study it. But there is genuinely no way to know for sure. And even if it is a man, standing on that trail alone doesn't make him guilty of anything. He could easily have been just another trespasser, someone who never came forward simply because he wasn't supposed to be up there in the first place, and didn't want the legal trouble. What makes this photograph so difficult to shake, though, is the timing. Of all the pictures Moke ever took in his short life, this is one of the very last, possibly the last. And in it, at the exact moment an experienced, healthy 18-year-old is about to vanish without a trace, there is a figure crouched in the brush, close by. When Moke failed to come home, the response was massive. Because part of the point in the story, do me a favor and drop a comment down below that just says, "I'm still here." I want to see exactly who's locked all the way into this one, because it's about to get even more unsettling. Investigators, crews scoured that mountain, every stretch of valley where a person could fall and disappear from view in seconds. Then, on Monday, the 2nd of March, something happened that sent everyone's hopes surging back up. 2 hikers in the area reported hearing cries for help, coming from somewhere near the stairway to heaven itself. You can imagine what that did to everyone involved. If Moke was alive, hurt, stranded, stuck somewhere on a ledge deep in that valley, there was still time to bring him home. The fire department pushed the search even harder, extending their efforts based on those reported cries. They went out, they listened, they combed through the area the sound seemed to be coming from. They found no sign of Moke, and no source for the voice at all. By around the 4th of March, the official search was called off. The Navy, working alongside the fire department, made the difficult determination that there was nowhere left they could safely reach that hadn't already been searched. For the official agencies, the search was over. For the people who loved Moke, it was anything but. His family, along with a dedicated group of volunteers, refused to stop. On the 5th of March, a team rappelled hundreds of feet straight down the cliffs at the end of a trail known as the Kalanahane Trail. Why there specifically? Because that was the exact location where Moke's final photograph had been taken. They descended into the one place they believed might hold an answer, dangling off a sheer rock face in the pouring rain. They found nothing. The entire island, it seemed, tried to help in whatever way it could. Helicopter pilots donated their own time and fuel to search from the air. A local school principal offered up a parking lot to be used as an emergency landing pad. People who had never even met Moke or his family showed up simply because they wanted to help bring a stranger's son home. It rained heavily during much of the search. That rain didn't just make an already treacherous cliffside even more dangerous, it erased things. Any tracks, any scent trail that might have existed, was gradually washed away by the storms moving through the mountains. Whatever physical trail Moke might have left behind simply disappeared along with him. In the years since, there have been no major breakthroughs. No remains have ever been recovered. No backpack, no clothing, no phone. The man in that photograph has never stepped forward, and has never been identified by anyone else either. The most widely accepted theory, according to investigators, is the simplest and most tragic one, that Moke, despite his experience, lost his footing somewhere along that unstable, rain-soaked terrain, and fell into a section of the valley that search teams were simply never able to safely access. Hawaii's mountainous terrain has swallowed searches before. Dense jungle, unstable cliffs, and unpredictable weather can make full recovery efforts nearly impossible, even when a general area is known. But that theory has never been confirmed, and it has never fully satisfied his family, especially not with that photograph sitting there, unresolved, more than 10 years later. We want to be clear about something before we close this one out. No individual has ever been named a suspect. No one has ever been charged. The man in that photograph remains completely unidentified, and there is no confirmed evidence that any crime took place at all. This case remains officially open, and officially unsolved. If you have any information related to this case, we'd encourage you to reach out directly to the Honolulu Police Department or your local Crime Stoppers organization. Sometimes, all it takes is one person, watching a video exactly like this one, to remember something they'd forgotten. Somewhere out there, a family is still waiting for an answer they may never get. That's the part of this job that never gets easier, telling stories like this one, knowing there isn't a clean ending to hand you. If this case stuck with you the way it stuck with me, make sure you're subscribed to the Cold Case Archive, because we bring you a new unsolved mystery just like this one every single week. Hit that like button if you made it all the way to the end, and down in the comments, let me know, do you think that figure in the photograph was ever really a person at all? What do you think actually happened to Moke on that mountain? I'll see you in the next one.